Hi, I'm Caliban. Red Alert was released in November 96, just 2 months after it was officially announced to the gaming media. It was highly anticipated, eagerly received and both a critical and commercial success. Command & Conquer, its predecessor, sold 1 million copies in its first year. Red Alert would sell over 2 million in its first 6 months. The most astonishing thing was that it arrived less than a year after the previous game, reportedly going from concept to completion in just under 9 months. This is an extraordinary feat, especially when you consider the complexity of the task. Red Alert was not a rehash of Command & Conquer. It had huge improvements to both the single and multiplayer systems. It had a whole new story, brand new units, sound effects and voice lines. Not only that, there were 2 whole campaigns to play, both consisting of something in the region of 15 missions, each with its own set of full motion video cutscenes, complete with real actors and classic lines. If that wasn't enough, it came with a new service called Westwood Chat for organising multiplayer games online, and a hidden 4 mission campaign where you get to battle a horde of giant ants. Now it is true that Red Alert uses an iteration of the same game engine as Command & Conquer, which does save a lot of development time. If we put both games side by side, the similarities are obvious. Here we're looking at the non-remastered versions in 800x600 resolution, which is higher than either game originally supported. Side by side they look pretty similar, with the only immediately noticeable changes in the design of the sidebar. However, this doesn't really do justice to the real improvements. Tiberium Dawn only supported a 320x200 resolution, while Red Alert supported 640x400, a huge upgrade at the time. It's really difficult to compare these in the modern day, as to properly demonstrate I would need a couple of photographs of old monitors, each one running an original release copy of the game on old hardware. However, as a rough comparison, this is a 320x200 screenshot of Command & Conquer up against a 640x400 screenshot of Red Alert, which I think does a half decent job of showing what a vast improvement it was. Using the same engine was obviously the smart choice. With the game less than a year old, it was still very up to date and comparable to the only real competitor at the time, Warcraft 2. It didn't feel like a shortcut back then, and it still doesn't today. There were also improvements a bit deeper within the engine. Units responded quicker, making the game flow a little better, and the AI of the computer opponent was improved to allow it to queue up movement orders, giving it the ability to use better angles of approach when making an attack. Red Alert also supported maps that were 4 times the size of Tiberium Dawn, 128x128 tiles instead of 64x64. This allowed for a far more interesting game area and gave the campaign creators a lot more to work with, resulting in more complex and involving missions. Although Red Alert did feature some of the same units as Tiberium Dawn, most notably the Mammoth tank and some of the infantry, there were a lot more added, with Red Alert featuring over 30, at least 50% more than Command & Conquer. The new units were pretty noteworthy and added whole new gameplay dynamics that were completely original for the series. The most obvious of these was in naval warfare, as well as the addition of fixed-wing aircraft and support units like troop transports, mine layers, guard dogs and spies. So let's jump into it and take a look around. The first thing we're presented with is the opening cinematic, all set to Hell March, probably one of the most iconic music tracks in PC gaming history. I think the soundtrack to Red Alert is one of the best ever created for a video game, and it's got to be one of Frank Kaplaki's greatest achievements. Most of the footage I'm using is from the remaster, as it runs way better on my machine at a far more suitable resolution for video capture, but this intro is from the original. The new feature that you notice first is a difficulty setting slider, something that its predecessor lacked. It's not that complex as far as I can remember. It doesn't affect how smart or aggressive your opponent is, but it acts more like a simple handicap. On hard difficulty, your units are 20% slower and weaker, whereas the computer's units are 20% faster and stronger. Easy mode is just the reverse, with you getting the 20% buff and your opponent having the 20% penalty. It was a thoughtful addition and one that gave experienced players more of a challenge while presenting those with more limited abilities a more relaxing experience. This was probably a very good idea, as like Command & Conquer, Red Alert did not pull any punches, and there are more than a handful of missions that take a considerable amount of effort to beat. I completed this mission on normal on my first try, but only with a couple of seconds left on the clock, hardly an outstanding victory. Red Alert tells the story of an alternate timeline, one in which Hitler never came to power and there was no Second World War in 39 to 45. Instead, Stalin's USSR grew in size and ambition until a full-scale war with the West was inevitable, sometime in the early 50s I think. The Allied campaign puts you in the hot seat as a new commander. Your overall campaign goal is to push Stalin's troop back until you can finally assault Moscow and put an end to his reign of terror. Although sometimes you're involved in fighting on the front lines, you're often tasked with separate missions of special importance to the war effort. Generals von Elsing and Stavros send you to rescue key personnel, extract defecting agents and respond to unexpected threats. More importantly, you're tasked with safeguarding Allied research into the Chronosphere program and hampering the employment of the Soviets' own wonder weapon, the Iron Curtain. The Soviet campaign starts in a similar fashion, with you assuming the position of a promising new lieutenant in the service of Stalin. You're sent to crush a small uprising, guard the border and then hunt a defector. Your missions continue to follow the path of the invasion of Europe, culminating in the Allies' surrender and Stalin enjoying a nice cup of tea in Buckingham Palace. However, not all is as it seems, and as the campaign unfolds, the balance of power inside the Soviet leadership structure shifts and something develops that sets the scene for the events of Tiberium Dawn. As you get deeper into each campaign, the missions become longer, more difficult and have a higher degree of complexity. New units are introduced along the way, and the final few missions have you juggling land, sea and air assaults, often simultaneously. Some missions also include a timer, so you must pick a plan and put it in motion with some degree of urgency. Even without the modern remaster, the game holds up really well today. I think the most notable frustration is the unit pathfinding, which is pretty dumb, and if you don't carefully micromanage your units they take some really questionable paths to their destination, or just rush headfirst towards the enemy's fixed defences and get themselves killed in the process. Apart from this, everything else is spot on. The missions are diverse, challenging and fun, and the units all serve a purpose and are a joy to use. The buildings, tech trees and other in-game elements fit together really well, and a few improvements over the original game, like not having to build all of your structures directly next to each other, feels really welcome. All of the features of the game itself are tied together really nicely by an enthralling story, well told through full motion video with real actors, CGI cutscenes and in-game events. It all feels very well written and executed, with Westwood continuing to spearhead the use of green screen technology in CGI sets. Rather than a cast of local stage actors or just Westwood staff, the top roles are packed full of professionals including John Milford, who appeared in over 100 film and TV roles before he worked on Red Alert, and Eugene Donarski, who has credits for a couple of Spielberg films, as well as the TV shows Batman, Star Trek and Seinfeld. One thing I find interesting about the game is how it's both totally a new game in terms of story and setting, while still feeling like a natural continuation of the previous. As we've already mentioned, there were attempts to tie this into the main game, but later Red Alert games either wrote them out or shuffled them into a different timeline. I get the impression they didn't really have much of a planning stage at the start of this project. They had a variety of features and interactions they wanted to include, but mostly just picked up where they left off and started writing code. I've found several contradictory interviews about their initial intentions, with the First World War, the Second World War and the Cold War all being claimed as the original idea. Joe Bostic, who is credited with the original concept and is one of the lead programmers, said the game actually started out as an expansion for Command & Conquer. I'm paraphrasing, but in an interview he said something along the lines of they were coming up with crazy new unit ideas and just including what was fun, and after a while they realised they had so many new things they would need a whole new game just to fit everything in. Thanks to a December '96 issue of a now defunct Croatian magazine called Hacker, we have some insight into the development timeline. It seems that Westwood started work on the 12th of December, although it only became Red Alert at the end of January when development for Windows 95 commenced. A couple of weeks later, in mid-February, they had completed the story drafts and announced some of the new units and buildings, and by the 1st of March, they had about 80% of the engine and 25% of the graphics and artwork completed. By September, they had wrapped up the principal development and moved on to testing, and 2 months later, they had finished bug fixing and sent the master discs away for copying. A week later, the game was released in North America. Now, I think some would find it easy to dismiss the achievement here, saying that older games were simpler and therefore quicker to make, but I think that would be a bit unfair. For one thing, development tools were nowhere near what they are today. Source control was very basic, and there also was a major technology jump going on from DOS to Windows 95 at the time. They also had to write and maintain their own game at a very low level, as there was no Unreal or Unity back then. Even more importantly, this was a time where the large majority of people didn't have access to the internet, and those that did were limited to older, slower modems where a 10 megabyte file would take the best part of an hour to download. Worse still, this was before the availability of consumer grade CD writers, and you couldn't use a USB stick to share patches between friends because, well, USB hadn't been invented yet, or at least adopted. My point is, you had to find and fix everything in your testing stage, as once those master discs were stamped, that was it. You couldn't make changes in the week or two before release, nor could you release a slew of hotfixes post-launch as we see with pretty much every game nowadays. If a game-breaking bug was detected post-launch, your product was defective, and most customers would have but one choice, to take the box back to the store and request a refund. You had to have pretty high standards to be successful back then. How Westwood managed to put this amazing, complex and content-heavy game together in such a short time is one of life's many mysteries. I can't think of a single other studio that's pulled off anything even close, and I think that's a real testament to the Westwood of the mid-90s. I was even more surprised to find out that they also released an expansion to Command & Conquer during the production of Red Alert. How did they find the time? You would think they must have had a team of thousands, but there were just 100 people credited on the production of Red Alert. And in an interview in 1997, Steve Tall, one of the other lead programmers, stated that the core team only numbered about 30. As a comparison to a more modern RTS, there are something like 4,000 names listed on the credits for StarCraft 2, and over 100 people worked on just the cinematics alone. Something else that surprises me is just how little Westwood is credited for this feat. Whenever you see discussions about a sequel arriving rather quickly, people tend to mention Left 4 Dead, which managed a sequel exactly 1 year after the first game was released. They might also mention an 8-bit title or two, but The Lost Levels is really just an extension to the original Super Mario Bros. And is nothing like the same scale or scope as Red Alert. So there you have it. Not only was Red Alert an amazing game that was held in high regard by both players and critics alike, it's probably the fastest produced sequel to any video game ever that managed to not only match, but far surpass the quality and successes of its predecessor.
But enough of this.
Hi there, I hope you enjoyed this little look back at Red Alert. I'd love to hear about your experiences with the game, so leave a comment if you can. If you enjoyed this video, then I'd appreciate a like, and if you want more of the same, click the subscribe button.